So it's either week 20 or week 19, day 1. I'm going to call it week 19 of Urban Agoge. And thank you for your patience bearing with me. But believe me, I wasn't really up to recording or exercising or any of that shit for the last week. I needed to get some perspective. So yeah, good morning. We're back in the woods. The reason I'm not running this morning is that I managed to acquire 2 of the biggest blisters I've ever had in my life, and that was due to very badly fitting boots. So yeah, don't wear as your only pair of shoes or footwear boots that are going to tear up your ankles and heels. So yeah, so that's one thing. So as many of you know, I went to the Byline festival and yeah, spent 4 nights, 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So 4.5 days at a music and political festival, mostly left wing. You know, to give you an example, Pussy Riot were on, Don Letts was playing, various left-wing journalists were there on various panels talking about various things wrong with the world. So from the setup and from the things you could expect to see, the Byline Festival, if you read the flyer, it would be the sort of thing that I would probably enjoy going to. I didn't just go to it. Thanks to Chipko, who some of you may remember from various bits. If you were at EMF last year, he was there in the Rangers encampment. Lovely guy. You know, much more positive outlook on life than me, etc. So yeah, let's bring it round. So yeah, I can get rainfall all over my face. Right. So, went to the Byline Festival the Thursday before last, turned up. Chipko wanted to get there early because he was performing and he had decided very early on to volunteer because they were short of staff. And while I was there, I did the same thing. So the Friday wasn't very eventful. It was a case of helping out with last minute prep before the punters started turning up at about midday, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, I think the gates opened. So yeah, the guys needed a little bit of a hand. Let me just adjust that. And yeah, I'm one of those people that likes to feel useful, so I went and put up a bunch of tents for people that had arrived without tents, and did a few bits and bobs, broke down some chairs. Chipko went off and produced a few acts at a tent, you know. And none of the actual work is really the thing that knocked me for 6, you know, just a bit of toting and hefting and lifting heavy objects and generally helping out. I did a bit of stage management, did a bit of assistant stage management, the wrong way round, I might add. What I should have done is been an assistant stage producer and then had a crack at being a stage producer on my own. So yeah, that was fun. Somebody it might be worth your while to look up if you like music documentaries is a guy called Don Letts, who is quite frankly amazing, and he was doing a DJ set, which is weird because he's a filmmaker, But he wanted to do a DJ set, and it was a fantastic set. The organisation, from my perspective, went to shit because we were running 20 minutes late. Had to cut short another great set by a great band, if you can find them, because I can't, called the Microdots, who are a reggae band, of course, reggae ska, very talented. Had to cut their set down to 20 minutes for timing reasons, which felt awful. And yeah, so the first thing I learned about stage management is that it's essentially like an aircraft carrier, and if you are the producer, if you ever find yourself as a producer on a stage on an aircraft carrier, the equivalent job would probably be the shooter, as in the guy that basically signals the steam catapult to launch the jet fighters. It's kind of like that. So you've got a radio, you're trying to get everybody on and off stage, like on and off the flight deck, as rapidly as possible and as close to time as possible. So yeah, which was annoying because you generally find, and this was one of my beefs and one of the things I don't think I'll ever tolerate off a performer ever again. Oh, I'm not walking down there, it's too muddy. Yeah, so performers will stay on stage as long as you let them, basically, and it doesn't matter how small the audience are or how terrible they are. In fact, it's almost in inverse proportions. A better act will do their set, they'll get off. A crappy act and a very unprofessional act will drag their heels on the stage and try and extend their time at the expense of every other subsequent act. Now remember that, because that's very much in the vein of what my problem was. So yeah, so when you volunteer to help out anybody, the one thing you don't feel that you deserve is people sniping at you and giving you crap. So that's very subjective to me. You know, I actually had a free ticket to that festival. I didn't need to volunteer. Neither did Chipko. He could have just turned up, played his pre-arranged DJ set on the Saturday night, and then he'd be done. But, you know, we both thought it would be a friendly gesture, a la Alice's Restaurant, to help out. So yeah, people under pressure often snipe, and if you wait, you know, 5 or 10 minutes, generally speaking, if they have given you any shit, most people will apologise and say, look, I'm under a lot of pressure, I'm trying to get this done. But having never done stage management and only having a fairly rudimentary idea of what it was, you know, I did my best. Chipko was a lot better at it than me and was able to make acts materialise out of thin air. Because the thing was, I don't know how this works at other festivals, but it probably works along the same lines, is when you're stage producing, you have a radio, you have a clipboard with the times on, and you spend most of your time ferrying performers to and fro the stage and calling the green room to make sure they're actually here. You know, they're actually on site and they're ready to go on. So after figuring out, unfortunately at the expense of a band, where your role lies as a producer, you do have the power to just get people off stage. You know, you don't have to be mean about it until they inevitably try and take the piss. And in the same way that one car braking 3 miles away will cause a massive traffic jam for you, one performer outstaying their welcome on a stage, or outstaying their time slot, which is pretty much the same thing in my opinion, will cause a backlog that can lead into hours. So again, I wanted to see the Microdots, whose set got cut short by at least 20 minutes, and I really wanted to see Don Letts. Seriously, look him up. He's been making videos. If you've ever seen a video with The Clash in it, it was probably directed and shot by Don Letts. You know, if you've ever watched a video about punk in the UK, Don Letts would have showed up and been interviewed. He's just like, you know, kind of the granddaddy of British underground music videos. You know, back in the punk era, you know, in the 1970s, picked up a Super 8 camera and started filming. So the guy's a legend, and I got to see him spin decks, and he turned up remarkably late, and until very, very close to his gig, his set, which was brilliant, I didn't know where he was, which was pretty stressful. But the reason I didn't know where he was that you RT, or you radio the green room to say, has such and such arrived? Are they on site? Are they settled in? Do they have everything? Are they ready to roll? And I didn't get an answer from the green room, and it wasn't until Sunday, really, that I rolled into the green room and I saw why. It's because nobody could be answered. Nobody was a peon enough to actually answer the radio in the green room, leading to all kinds of confusion. The people in the green room were too important to find shit out. So that made an absolute lie, and the green room should not have been the centre for communications for the producers. So there's that. People being too important to answer questions, people being, you know, there being no one to man the radio and find out where people were. So that's like a pet peeve. So I spent an hour calling the green room trying to find out, you know, as per my job, trying to do my job, getting zero answer. Anyway, it turned out that Mr. Letts was just running late, arrived on time, but as we'll go into later, it might well have been by design. So that was stressful. And then, you know, when I was the assistant producer on one of the other venues on the Sunday night, I just got to saw shit go sideways and unravel, and, you know, me and Chip go get loads of grief for it. Anyway, I'm not going to go into details on that side of things anyway. I am going to go into details though on the other thing, because I've had a week to think about it almost. So yeah. But that's just festivals. That's nothing to do with the existential crisis that's kind of kept me off the screen for a week. So just imagine being under that kind of stress, which is why I needed to leave it time to see if how I felt was how I really felt, and I wasn't just pissed off due to getting hassled. I mean, it made me look harder at the people I was there with. So, Byline Festival, left-wing music festival. They had some good acts, they had some terrible acts, they had some good talks, they had some very depressing talks and stuff. But yeah, so if you can imagine, I don't know if there is a left-wing paper in the United States, but in the UK we've got this paper called The Guardian, which I broadly respect. You know, I respect anybody that's gonna, you know, go and find out stuff and then tell me about it. I did meet a Daily Mail journalist, and she was kind of an alright person. So if you do know the, I didn't catch her name, but there again, I find that really difficult. So yeah, so all sorts of people turning up. I worked in the information tent, I produced, I assistant produced, I roadied, did all kinds of stuff. Did my very best to be as efficient as possible, which was probably my downfall in trying to do a good job and still getting slated for it. I should have been a clueless dickhead and just wandered around, not known anything at people, but I did my very best. You know, we set up the info tent, you know, with very little information, and as the day wore on, more information was acquired. You know, I did that. So lots of middle class people being passive aggressive at me for me not knowing stuff that I could not have possibly known. Even the production team and the senior management didn't know some of the answers to some of the questions that I had. We did our best. We reunited people with lost property, which was cool. You know, I didn't snap at anybody, which was amazing. You know, all that kind of stuff. So it's this big festival, 5,000 people turn up. There is footage of the site, but to be quite honest, by the time Saturday rolled around, I was in no mood to pick up a camera, and I couldn't have been unbiased by Saturday and Sunday. What really blew me away, and this is the thing that just sort of like, you know, managed to lower my worldview until I remembered and paid attention to the fact that people who watch Rangers, people who are on the Discord, and people who are part of the urban agoge community are the exceptions in humanity. So I saw a lot of very middle class people be told flat out that the people in power were essentially gonna, you know, wipe them out. And they all nodded sagely. And a whole lot, you know, basically they were, you know, flat out told these things weren't covered up. You know, climate change denial being a corporate strategy, but we all knew that. It seemed to come as a shock to some of the people in the audience, which was kind of interesting. And that, you know, the planet's ability to support human life was on the wane. So yeah, they were told flat out by people more qualified than me, kind of exactly the same thing as I would tell people. So it's, you know, so you had this guy that had actually been in the room with these evil monsters and literally found out that, yeah, the big energy companies absolutely believe in climate change. It's just that, you know, they're making too much money right now to want to do anything about it. So they have these retrenchments where they say, oh yes, well there is climate change, but the CO2 is good for the trees. And then they let the very earnest people that are trying to change public opinion and change the way huge companies do business, and then they let them fight away at that for a bit. Then they'll say, okay, well yes, we are responsible for climate change, and yes, the CO2 will raise the temperature, but you know, you as individuals need to drive less, or you as individuals need to use less energy or create less pollution. And then they'll let, you know, the funded green campaigners, you know, battle away with that, and then they'll have another retrenchment, and they're going to keep that up for as long as possible. And with the amount of money they've got and the fact that they have a crucial resource, energy, they can drag that out for the next 30 or 40 years, which will by then be largely too late for a large number of people on the planet. So, you know, truth was being spoken. Unfortunately, it was the people it was being spoken to. And you got to see the side of middle class and upper middle class people that you didn't really see, because they were at play. They weren't out doing their jobs, they weren't running companies, they weren't being upper middle management in huge corporations. You know, you could see them networking a little bit and yeah, schmoozing. And I unfortunately went into the green room where they were fenced off from everybody else. And they were kind of fucking heinous people. You know, really boorish, you know, really self-righteous, really, you know, just awful, awful people. You know, you need to be this important to talk to me kind of shit. They weren't normal people. And curiously, the people that I did gel with and the people whose performances I thought were cool, none of them stayed on site. You know, Donlets turned up, went home. Microdots turned up, went home. People who really had things to do just didn't want to stay around them, and I can understand that. The green room was just, I mean, I know it's that I wasn't in a very plush tent with all the top echelons of society, and yeah, it was kind of sucky. And you know, just little clues all over the event. You know, those people do not like working class people. You know, I was kind of in a minority. You know, there were decent people, like the immediate contact management, the people that I connected with, and the people that I was talking to over the weekend. You know, the people that had experience in managing festivals and were being paid to be managers there were lovely. You know, all the people I was working with were all right. Most of them were kind of middle class. Most of them were working and kowtowing a bit because they were gaining qualifications and experience in running festivals, which I gather is pretty lucrative, and I can't fault them for that. But once you went like one micro notch higher, it just was horrible. I think the thing that stung me most, and the thing that made me start reflecting on who it was I was sharing a field with, was an artist that does illustrations for the oldie, and she was nice enough, but it was an indication of people that are, you know, nice enough people to will say horrendous things to you. It's almost like you could see how fascism and racism rise up when, you know, middling nice people sort of like try and, you know, blend in and kind of try and mitigate a little bit of the horrendousness of what human beings are capable of. And I just got the tiniest sliver of what it must be like if you are in a group where against whom bigotry is kind of institutionalized. So, you know, say, imagine sort of like, so if you were, I don't know, black in Massachusetts or Texas or somewhere like that, where there's like an institutional racism that you're aware of, but you think exists much higher and much further away from you than it really does, and then being reminded of it, that little stab. You know, nothing like, you know, I've got a lot of privilege. You know, I can afford to keep myself. I do a job that just about pays the bills. I'm white, I'm male, I've got a lot of privilege knocking around. I understand that. But when somebody refers to people that don't have, just literally the only barrier, don't have quite as much money as you do, when somebody refers to those people and people like me as other species, even in jest, well, you know, let me tell you, what that does to you is you wonder idly, as you're listening to this, you wonder maybe if you shouldn't give them a reason to fear you, because all hatred comes from fear. And it was amazing. It was like, you know, being hated for your lack of money. You know, like I've got money kicking around, I can afford to do what I want, I can afford to buy what I need and stuff, but I don't have the kind of money where you can spend £700 on a weekend just for your accommodation and your ticket, and then another 150 or so pounds to buy your food while you're there. Not middle class enough. So yes, it was, and I started to see them in a very different light. You know, started to look at the people that were wandering around the festival. You know, after I'd heard that, that's when I went into the green room and I saw them holding court and doling out favours to one another, and I couldn't get out of that room fast enough. And maybe I should have filmed it, maybe I should have been more undercover, but you know, I just couldn't see, I just saw red. And I just literally thought, these are the people standing in the way of, you know, humanity being united. These are the people that enable those people in power that do awful things. This is their base, if you like, for maintaining wealth and privilege at the expense of other people's survival. And, you know, there's a part of me that just thinks, you know what? There are many, many more of us. People, you know, like the army and the police are mostly working class. You know, we just need to delete those people from existence, which I know isn't a very workable strategy. It's the fastest strategy, and I'm sure everybody that was going to do the killing would volunteer to go live somewhere else once society had rebuilt itself. You know, sort of like if you've seen Firefly, when the government assassin sort of goes, no, I've got to go into exile once we sort this out. I'm a monster, I can't possibly live in this idyllic future society that we're working towards. And I was kind of on that guy's side, you know, as far as he saw it. It was, yeah, pretty horrendous. Don't see it very often. But, yeah, they are terrified of working class people. And basically that fear transmutes into hatred very quickly. They're claustrophobes. And I think that's why, you know, this is the thing, you know, 100% of those people vote. 100% of them will donate actual money to those political causes. And then 100% of their children will go on to further those causes, pretty much. I'm not saying, don't misinterpret me, I'm not saying that we should go ahead and just like murder a whole bunch of people. Even though I think that's the only rapid change strategy, I don't think that's viable. Where do you stop? You know, somebody's got an extra £5 in their pocket or get promoted at work. I mean, you can see why Mao tried it, you know, during the Cultural Revolution, where they just wiped out anybody that was even vaguely intellectual looking, and teachers and anybody with an opposing viewpoint, and just took them out. Millions of people died. I don't think it's viable. I don't think it's, you know, it's obviously not morally okay, but you know, sort of like if you knew it was going to work, then you might sort of say, right, well, that's the cost. You know, it's 1 million people, you know, or the planet, because these are the people. So we've got to kind of like psychologically secede from that and do it really, really well and be in a better position than them. I'm not saying we're waiting for the apocalypse. I'm just saying, you know, I think there needs to be some way of forming communities of, you know, intelligent, competent people where we just go and don't come back, because it's distressing. Because of point 2, you know, when you look at things that humans can do really well, like, you know, putting an astronaut on the moon, you know, building the pyramids, curing smallpox, all that kind of crazy, you know, amazing, thousands of people band together to achieve one goal. Humans can't do that. And that's what super depressed me. You had all these people talking about saving the planet and the environment and stuff like that, and when it came down to it, none of them could make any kind of a shift. They were just sort of going, oh dear, isn't that terrible? And then they littered all over the place. At a small festival about the environment, where people were endlessly talking about it. The Extinction Rebellion were there doing a great job. They were really interesting people and great to get to know. And various artists that were pushing back against political oppression, like Pussy Riot, who also put on a great show. As a side note, they went on over an hour and a half late, which made my 20-minute delay for Don Lett's set seem like pretty small potatoes. Which was weird. So, but there you go. So human beings couldn't even look at people that were plainly telling them in the face. They could all sit there and watch artistic documentaries about the fact that the planet's in danger, about the fact that, you know, people need to start upping their game as far as their carbon footprint is concerned, all that kind of jazz. And they still left litter all over the place at the end of the festival. The place was covered in litter, people just putting down plates with half-eaten food on it, not even putting them in the bin, There were bins all over the site, and people couldn't even be bothered to put stuff in the bin or collect their bottles. They just wandered around, left all their crap all over the place. It was amazing. So that, I mean, and that's what really blew me away. I mean, I know other festivals would have littered more, but if you were just saying, planet in danger, team humanity, we need your help, and they couldn't even not litter. And these were supposedly well-educated people. These weren't people that had got any like anger issues with the planet, that in the way that some people that just throw crap all over the ground. But it was just like, and they treated the people that were campaigning and making art and singing songs and telling stories and shooting films about saving the planet that we all exist on. They sort of nodded, and then promptly, as soon as any sort of minor suggestion of change, they just carried on being them. And it wasn't a nice thing to see. It was like, you know, like I'm trying to do Urban Agoge to get people off the couch, to get people to do stuff. And then I saw a heck of a lot of humanity in an environment where they could change. It wasn't like information was not forthcoming and all these things. And they're not gonna. They're not going to use less. They're not going to waste less food. They're not going to litter less. They're not going to use less energy. They're not going to try and put sustainable energy in their homes. They're just not. They're not going to do anything different. And these were supposedly the more educated people. These were the people that read newspapers. These are the sort of people that do research into things they're interested in, that have got access to all the information and access to be able to make small changes. Ooh. And yeah, I just saw 5,000 people be told the truth and not change in any way, and still remain, you know, fearful, crappy people. You know, I'm not saying everybody there was crappy. I did meet a lot of really nice people and stuff like that, but I was going through, like, just watching them and going through this mad, like, existential crisis, and just seeing them all over the place. You know, it's sort of like, you know, like uncaring humans stomping the earth. You know, just got to see a microcosm of it, like as if, you know, we were in a town where this was just how it was. And they hate the working classes. And they're going to let us die, basically, is how that goes down. So it took me, you know, so apologies for me taking time out and not, I mean, obviously I'll probably be unpacking this for weeks, but I did go into, you know, that environment, and I did see how people that have got more power than I do just don't give a monkey's. I mean, on a flip note, it was very apparent that working class people can make art and middle class people who have not got the mileage can't make art. So going back to Henry Rollins, you know, knowledge is bullshit without mileage. You know, the people with mileage and that had been through the ringer and had wrestled to bring their vision into some kind of performance or some kind of art,